This is a combat class, not a courtship ritual. Control yourself. Human * first contact protocol. The morning alarm at the Intergalactic Combat Academy pierced through the dormitory halls with its familiar tritone shriek. Lieutenant Zarathel Kessin adjusted her ceremonial combat harness one final time, her emerald scales catching the artificial sunlight streaming through the Academy's massive viewport. Today marked a historic moment, the first integration of human recruits into ICAS elite combat program. Zarathel had spent 3 cycles preparing for this assignment. Her superiors from the Chiran Dominion had been explicit. Prove the humans were either worthy allies or dangerous liabilities. There could be no middle ground. Her species had thrived for millennia on precision, discipline, and emotional restraint. The reports on human behavior suggested they possessed none of these qualities. The training bay doors hissed open, revealing 12 human recruits standing in what could generously be called formation. Zarathel's throat ridges fluttered involuntarily, a sign of surprise she quickly suppressed. They were smaller than expected, their skin tone varying wildly, and their posture utterly lacking in proper military bearing. One of them was actually smiling. Attention. Zarathel's voice cracked like a plasma whip across the chamber. 11 humans snapped to rigid attention. The 12th, a dark-haired male with intelligent brown eyes, executed what appeared to be a casual salute while maintaining that infuriating grin. "I am Lieutenant Zarathel Kessin of the Chiran Dominion," she announced, pacing before them with predatory grace. "For the next 6 cycles, I will determine whether your species deserves a place among the galaxy's elite warriors. Those who fail will return to your homeworld in disgrace. Those who succeed," she paused, letting her gaze sweep across each face, "will earn the right to call themselves soldiers." The grinning human raised his hand. "Question, Lieutenant." Zarathel's scales shifted to a deeper shade of green, a warning coloration. "You will address me as Instructor Kessin. Speak." "Jake Morrison, ma'am." "Just wondering, when you say elite warriors, are we talking about the kind who follow orders blindly, or the kind who think creatively under pressure?" A collective intake of breath from the other recruits told Zarathel this was considered bold, even by human standards. Her throat ridges flared, and she caught herself before her scales could shift to the aggressive crimson pattern. "Recruit Morrison," she said, closing the distance between them until they stood mere inches apart. "Creativity without discipline is chaos. Chaos gets soldiers killed. In Chiran military doctrine, there's no room for improvisation." Jake's smile never wavered. "With respect, Instructor, didn't the Chiran Third Fleet improvise their way out of the Endorian Nebula ambush? I read that battle report during our orientation." Zarathel felt her secondary heart skip a beat. No human should know about that classified operation. Yet here was this irreverent recruit casually referencing one of her people's most celebrated tactical victories. The operation had indeed required creative interpretation of standard protocols. "How do you know of that?" "Engagement," she demanded. "I study tactics from all species. Figured if we're going to fight alongside you, we should understand how you think." Jake's expression grew more serious. "The Chiran approach to adaptive strategy is actually pretty fascinating. Disciplined flexibility, you might call it." For a moment, Zarathel found herself genuinely intrigued. Then she remembered her duty. "Flattery will not excuse insubordination, Morrison. 20 push-ups. Now." "Yes, Mum." Jake dropped immediately, executing perfect form that spoke of extensive physical conditioning. As he counted off repetitions, Zarathel noticed the fluid efficiency of his movements, the controlled breathing, the way his muscles coiled and released with mechanical precision. Despite his casual attitude, there was clearly serious training behind that irreverent facade. This would be more complicated than she'd anticipated. Physical contact protocols. 3 weeks into training, Zarathel had established a grudging respect for the human recruits' adaptability. They learned quickly, absorbed punishment without complaint, and displayed an alarming tendency toward self-sacrifice for their squad mates. All except Morrison, who continued to challenge every protocol with questions that were simultaneously infuriating and insightful. Today's lesson focused on close quarters combated discipline requiring absolute trust between partners. Zerathel had paired each human with a senior student from various species, carefully ensuring no cross-cultural incidents. Morrison, naturally, remained without a partner. "It appears you'll be working with me, recruit," she announced, trying to ignore the way her scales brightened involuntarily. The hand-to-hand combat forms required precise positioning, with each partner reading the other's movements to counter and flow into the next technique. Zerathel demonstrated with mechanical precision, showing how proper stance and breathing created an impenetrable defense. "Your turn," she instructed, assuming the ready position. Morrison nodded, circling her with surprising grace. When he moved to execute the first technique, his hand brushed against her forearm to establish proper leverage. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through Zerathel's nervous system. Among Sharans, deliberate physical contact during combat training was reserved for bonded pairs or potential mates. It was an intimate gesture that spoke of absolute trust and shared breath. Her scales flushed deep amber, the color of arousal and interest. She jerked away as if burned. "Maintain distance," she snapped, her voice higher than intended. Morrison looked genuinely confused. "I'm sorry, did I hurt you? I was just trying to get the grip right." "You will not," Zerathel fought to control her breathing. "Physical contact beyond the minimum required is forbidden." "Okay, sure." Morrison resumed position, but the next technique required even closer contact. This time, when he placed his palm against her shoulder blade to execute a throw, Zerathel's entire body betrayed her. Her scales cycled through a rapid display of amber and gold patterns that would have any Chiran male immediately recognizing her receptivity. Worse, her pheromone glands released a subtle scent signature that the Academy's environmental systems would certainly detect and log. "This is a combat class, not a courtship ritual. Control yourself, human." The words exploded from her throat before she could stop them. Morrison stepped back immediately, hands raised. "Oh, okay. I'm clearly doing something wrong here. Want to explain what I'm missing?" The entire training bay had gone silent. Zerathel could feel dozens of eyes watching, waiting. Her scales were still cycling through mating displays, and Morrison's scent-clean sweat tinged with something uniquely human was doing strange things to her ability to think clearly. "Among my people," she said carefully, "physical contact during combat practice has cultural significance. Your casual touching is being interpreted as..." She struggled for words that wouldn't make the situation worse. "As what?" "As a mating overture." Morrison's eyebrows shot up. Oh no. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. We touch all the time during training. High fives, fist bumps, shoulder grabs. It's just how we communicate physical approval or guidance." Zerathel felt her mortification deepen. "You engage in casual mating displays with your entire species." "What? No. It's not." Morrison ran a hand through his hair, looking as flustered as she felt. "It's just friendly contact. Like pack bonding, I guess. Social reinforcement." The concept was alien to Zerathel, but she could see the genuine confusion in his expression. He truly hadn't understood the implications of his actions. The realization should have been relieving. Instead, she found herself oddly disappointed. "We will continue with verbal instruction only," she announced to the class, her voice steadier now. "Partners will maintain minimum contact protocols." But as training resumed, Zerathel found her attention constantly drifting to Morrison's movements. The way he adapted each technique to his smaller frame, the fluid transitions between offensive and defensive postures, the intense concentration that replaced his usual casual demeanor during combat. Most troubling of all, she began to wonder what it would feel like to have those hands on her scales again, this time with full understanding of what it meant. Accidental bonding challenge-est incident reports began accumulating on Zerathel's desk, like evidence of her failing discipline. Environmental sensors recorded elevated pheromone levels during every training session with Morrison. Her scales displayed involuntary coloration patterns that had the Academy's xenobiologist, Dr. Thane Korvik, requesting private consultations about interesting interspecies biochemical responses. Most damning of all, Morrison seemed completely oblivious to the effect he was having on her. He'd started bringing her coffee during their morning briefings, a human beverage. He'd somehow convinced the commissary to stock the bitter, energizing drink was surprisingly palatable, and Zarathel found herself looking forward to these small moments of consideration. When she'd mentioned struggling with the Academy's temperature settings, he'd quietly adjusted the environmental controls in their shared workspace without fanfare. It was these small kindnesses that proved most dangerous to her equilibrium. The breaking point came during a demonstration of ceremonial combat forms. Zarathel was teaching the class about formal challenge protocols, the ancient traditions that governed honor duels between warriors of different species. Each culture had specific gestures that indicated acceptance of single combat and understanding. These nuances could prevent accidental conflicts. The Altarian wing spread indicates readiness for aerial combat, she explained, demonstrating the posture. The crystalline resonance pulse shows willingness to engage in harmonic warfare. And the Chiran. She paused, realizing the delicate nature of what she was about to demonstrate. The Chiran challenge acceptance involves a specific scale. Pattern combined with this gesture, she extended her right hand, palm up, while allowing her throat ridges to flare in the traditional display. This indicates willingness to engage in combat with the challenger as an equal. It's considered a high honor. Morrison raised his hand. What if someone wanted to show respect, but wasn't actually challenging you, like acknowledging your skill? Without the formal duel part, there is no such gesture in Chiran tradition, Zarathel replied. One either challenges or shows submission. There is no middle ground. Morrison considered this, then executed a surprisingly accurate reproduction of her demonstration, hand extended, posture proud, even managing to flare his throat in mimicry of her ridge display. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Every Chiran in the training bay fell silent, their scales shifting to the deep blue of shock. The other species looked around in confusion. Sensing the sudden tension, without understanding its source, Zarathel felt her world tilt. Morrison had just issued a formal bonding challenge in front of witnesses. In Chiran law, she had three options: accept the challenge and engage in ritual combat. That would end in either death or life mating, refuse and bring dishonor to both their houses, or declare him unworthy, which would require her to defeat him in single combat to prove the point. Morrison, she said carefully, do you understand what you just did? His confident expression faltered as he took in the reactions around him. I was trying to show respect for your traditions. You just challenged me to a bonding duel. The color drained from Morrison's face. I what? In Chiran tradition, that gesture can only be made by one seeking to prove themselves worthy of mating rights. Through combat, by performing it in front of witnesses, you've initiated formal courtship protocols. Morrison looked around the silent training bay, then back at her. Can I take it back? Not without bringing dishonor to both of us. Zarathel felt her training warring with emotions she didn't want to examine. By law, I must respond within one cycle, and your options are? Zarathel found herself studying his face, the genuine concern in his eyes, the way he'd unconsciously shifted into a protective stance as if preparing to shield her from the consequences of his mistake. Combat, she said quietly, always combat. What she didn't say was that she'd spent the last 3 weeks wondering what it would be like to face him as an equal, to test her skills against his unconventional tactics, to match her discipline against his creativity. The thought terrified her more than any battle she'd ever faced. That night, alone in her quarters, Zarathel reviewed Morrison's training recordings. His improvement had been remarkable, not just in technique, but in his understanding of the mental discipline required for true mastery. He'd begun incorporating elements of Chiran philosophy into his combat style, creating something uniquely his own. Tomorrow, she would have to decide not just whether to fight him, but whether she wanted to win. The heart of Combat Academy's Grand Arena hadn't hosted a formal bonding challenge in over 50 cycles. Word of the unprecedented human Chiran duel had spread throughout the station, drawing observers from a dozen species. Zarathel stood in the preparation chamber, adjusting her ceremonial combat harness while trying to control the tremor in her hands. Commander Voss Harun, her immediate superior, entered without ceremony, the veteran Chiran's scales displayed. The deep purple of concern. You can still declare him unworthy without combat, Harun said. A simple statement of his inferior status would end this. He's not inferior. The words came out before Zarathel could stop them. His techniques are unorthodox, but his skill is genuine. His tactical understanding rivals officers with years more training. Harun's scales shifted to amber surprise. You sound like you respect him. I do. Zarathel met her commander's gaze steadily. That's the problem. In the opposite preparation chamber, Morrison was receiving his own counsel from Colonel Reese, the human liaison officer. The older man's weathered face showed deep concern. Son, you need to understand what you're walking into, Reese said. Chiran bonding duels aren't just about skill, they're about proving you can protect and provide for a potential mate. She's not going to hold back. Morrison nodded. Testing the weight of the ceremonial weapons. Good. I wouldn't want her to. Jake, listen to me. If you lose, you'll be sent home in disgrace. If you win, Reese paused. Do you understand what winning means? Morrison was quiet for a long moment. It means she'll be bound to me by her people's laws. It means I'll have forced her into a situation she never wanted. He looked up at Reese. How do I throw a fight without dishonoring her? You don't, Reese said grimly. In Chiran culture, holding back in combat is the ultimate insult. You fight with everything you have, or you destroy her reputation forever. The arena floor was ancient polished stone, marked with symbols from 100 different warrior traditions. Zarathel entered first, her ceremonial armor gleaming under the harsh lights. The traditional weapons felt familiar in her hands curved. Blades designed for Chiran physiology, waited for her species' particular style of combat. Morrison entered opposite her, wearing adapted human combat gear and carrying weapons modified for his smaller frame. The sight of him serious, focused, but still somehow radiating that irreverent confidence made her secondary heart skip. The referee, a neutral Altarian judge, announced the terms in 3 languages: single combat to submission or yield. Victory would establish mating rights according to Chiran law, witnessed by the assembled representatives of 12 species. Combatants, take your positions. They circled each other slowly, Zarathel reading Morrison's stance, his breathing, the micro-expressions that might telegraph his intentions. He'd learned much in their weeks of training, but she had decades of experience and superior physical capabilities. I'm sorry it came to this, Morrison said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. Don't apologize, she replied. Fight. He came at her fast, using the aggressive style humans favored, but with Chiran footwork that turned his attack into something she barely recognized. Zarathel deflected his first strike, countered with a move that should have ended the match, and found herself blocking a response she hadn't seen coming. Morrison wasn't just using human tactics, he was blending everything he'd learned into something new. Her careful instruction in Chiran technique, combined with his natural creativity, had produced a fighting style that was uniquely his own. The duel intensified. Zarathel found herself pushed to her limits, not because Morrison was stronger or faster, but because he was unpredictable. Every time she thought she had him figured out, he'd shift approaches, force her to adapt, make her think instead of relying on trained responses. It was exhilarating. For the first time in her military career, Zarathel was facing an opponent who challenged not just her physical skills, but her mental agility. Morrison fought like he lived with passion, creativity, and absolute commitment to the moment. When he finally backed her against the arena wall, both of them breathing hard, weapons locked together in a test of strength, Zarathel realized something that changed everything. She didn't want to win. She wanted to fight beside him, not against him. Yield, she said quietly. Morrison's eyes widened. What? No. I'm not accepting your surrender. You're clearly the better fighter. I yield to your worthiness, she clarified, using the formal language. You have proven yourself in combat. The bonding challenge is satisfied. The arena erupted in shocked murmurs. A Chiran yielding to a human was unprecedented. But Zarathel felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. Morrison stepped back, lowering his weapons, Zara, what does this mean? She looked into his eyes, seeing the same confusion and attraction that had been building between them for weeks. It means, she said, loud enough for the witnesses to hear, that we need to discuss the terms of our partnership. Part 5, New Protocols. The diplomatic fallout from the bonding duel lasted 3 cycles. Representatives from the Chiran Dominion arrived demanding explanations, while human officials struggled to understand the legal implications of an interspecies mating bond. The Academy's neutral status was questioned, protocols were reviewed, and everyone seemed to have an opinion about what Zarathel and Morrison had done to galactic politics. Through it all, they weren't allowed to speak privately. Morrison continued his training while Zarathel faced endless committee hearings, legal reviews, and cultural assessment boards. The formal bonding ceremony was postponed, pending proper diplomatic consultation. It was Dr. Korvik who finally provided the solution, presenting his research to the Joint Review Board. With characteristic Vulcoid logic, the biochemical evidence is conclusive, he announced, displaying charts and data streams. Both subjects have been exhibiting bonding indicators for nearly 4 weeks. Lieutenant Kessen's pheromone patterns, scale coloration cycles, and hormonal fluctuations all indicate genuine mate recognition responses. Recruit Morrison's biometrics show elevated oxytocin levels, altered sleep patterns, and stress responses consistent with human pair bonding behaviors. Admiral Chen, representing Earth's interests, leaned forward. Are you saying they were already bonding before the challenge? I'm saying the challenge was merely the formal recognition of a process that had been occurring. Naturally, the duel didn't create the bond, it simply acknowledged what already existed. Commander Haroon's scales cycled through several color patterns before settling on thoughtful blue. If the bond predates the challenge, then it wasn't forced through combat. It was recognized through combat. The distinction is significant in Chiran law, agreed the Dominion's legal representative. A recognition bond carries different obligations than a conquest bond. Dr. Korvik nodded. Furthermore, my research suggests this could be the first documented case of natural cross-species bonding between humans and Chirans. The implications for future diplomatic relations are considerable. 3 days later, Zarathel finally received permission to speak with Morrison privately. She found him in the Academy's observation lounge, staring out at the stars with an expression she couldn't read. "Hey," he said when she approached. "How are you holding up? I should be asking you that question. You're the one facing exile if this doesn't work out." Morrison turned to face her, and she was struck again by the way his eyes seemed to see straight through her careful composure. "Are you having second thoughts?" The question hung between them, loaded with weeks of uncertainty and enforced separation. Zarathel considered her answer carefully. "Among my people, bonds are formed through careful negotiation between families, with contracts and ceremonies that take cycles to complete. What we've done is," she paused, searching for the right words, "unprecedented. That's not really an answer." Zarathel moved to stand beside him at the viewport, close enough to catch his scent, to feel the warmth radiating from his human metabolism. Her scales shifted involuntarily to amber. "I've spent my entire life following protocols," she said, quietly, every decision measured against tradition, every action weighed for its political implications. And then you arrived, with your questions and your casual touches and your complete disregard for proper procedure. I'm sensing a but coming. But you also brought something I didn't know I was missing. Zarathel turned to meet his gaze. You made me want to fight beside you, not just command you. You made me want to discover new possibilities instead of just maintaining old ones. Morrison smiled, that same irreverent grin that had infuriated and intrigued her from the beginning. "So what do we do now? Now we write new protocols." Zarathel reached out, letting her fingers brush against his hand. The contact still sent electricity through her nervous system. But now she understood it wasn't just biochemistry, it was choice together. The formal ceremony took place 2 weeks later, with representatives from both species present to witness the first official human-Chiran bonding. The Academy's chaplain had worked with cultural experts to create a ritual that honored both traditions while establishing new precedents. As they exchanged vows in 3 languages, Zarathel reflected on how much had changed since that first Day in the training bay. Morrison's casual disregard for protocol had forced her to examine her own assumptions, while her discipline had given his creativity focus and direction. You may now. The chaplain paused, consulting his notes for the proper terminology, exchanged the recognition of bond partnership. Morrison leaned close enough to whisper in her ear, "Is this the part where I'm supposed to kiss you? Or is there some special Chiran thing I'm missing?" Zarathela's scales flushed amber as she laughed the first time she'd allowed herself that luxury in public. "This is the part where you improvise, human." His lips were warm against hers, tasting of the cough they'd shared that morning and promises of adventures yet to come. Round them, the assembled witnesses broke into applause, some understanding the gesture, others simply recognizing joy when they saw it. Later, as they walked through the academy corridors toward their new shared quarters, Morrison took her hand with the same casual confidence he brought to everything else. "So," he said, "what's our first mission as an officially bonded team?" Zarathel considered the question, thinking of all the ways their partnership might reshape both their careers and their species relationship. "We have a class of new recruits arriving next week, apparently. News of our success has inspired more interspecies teams to apply." Morrison grinned. "Sounds like we're going to need some new protocols. Good thing I know someone who specializes in breaking the old ones." They walked on together, writing the first chapter of a story that would change the galaxy's understanding of what was possible when different worlds learned to fight as one.